Indiana County, it's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com. He's Bob Pollock from the Extension. You can give him a call at 479-1160 or 349-WCCS. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack. Voted Best Personal Injury Law Firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
I have a question for you about bugs.
Okay.
Because there's a ton of them out there right now trying to get into the house. Ladybugs, stink bugs, everything's trying to get in to avoid the cold weather, and there just seems to be no way to avoid them. So laying that aside, there are bugs that are going to overwinter well. There are bugs that are not. So let's look at a few of those. Stink bugs, overwintering. They need to find someplace warm?
Well, not necessarily warm, but any kind of protected location. So it might be indoors. Mm-hmm. You know, most cases they're going to be outdoors somewhere. Mm-hmm. You know, and it might be in the cracks and crevices of bark on a tree. You know, an older tree that has deeper bark, or maybe where bark's damaged and they can get in underneath that. Anywhere that's kind of protected. When adult insects that are overwintering get inside, that's maybe not the best place for them, because there probably isn't any food source.
Tell them that.
Right. Yeah, they should be smart enough to know better, but they're not always. Not always.
So they seek the warmer climates.
Yeah.
But does a bug like that? Does the actual bug that is there in the fall, does it survive through the winter and then begin again in the reanimate itself in the spring? Or,
right. So
or are we just looking at eggs that'll hatch?
Some insects are overwintering. The adults would lay eggs in the fall. Mm-hmm. So spotted lanternfly, I was going to say gypsy moth, spongy moth. Those adults die, but they lay eggs before they die. So it's the eggs that overwinter and are attached to a surface.
Okay.
All right. And then there's other insects like stink bugs, lady beetles that will overwinter as adults. So that's their normal life cycle allows them to overwinter as adults. And then they may mate in the spring and then start to produce the next generation, or they might go into winter carrying eggs, you know, that they'll then lay. They might give birth to living insects, you know. So aphids are one. They'll have a stem mother, they call it. So she'll overwinter, but she will give live birth in the spring to little baby aphids. That'll be crawling around. Right.
They're so cute.
So each insect has its life cycle, and then so we just have to follow each individual one to see, okay, at what stage does this overwinter, and then kind of figure out, is it a problem, is it not a problem? And, of course, most adult insects that will get into your house during the winter months aren't really going to cause much. They're a nuisance pest. We group them that way. They're not going to feed or damage on anything for the most part. You know, there are aphids and mites and things that will affect indoor plants. So those can be a problem. And those need to have warmer conditions. They don't do well. You know, a lot of mites will overwinter as eggs because that's the stage where they're most protected. And allows them to overwinter. They would not, the adult stage of that would not handle cold, you know, below freezing temperatures well.
Yeah.
They would die off.
All right. I want to go a whole different direction next.
But, you know, what do we do to try to minimize or prevent those insects from getting indoors? You know, and a lot of that comes down to sealing things up, you know, checking the structure, looking around windows, caulking material, you know, things like that we can do to try to seal up any gaps and things that might be there you never can get it 100%. Every house is a little different and different structural materials, whether it's brick or wood or siding, vinyl, whatever that may be. Each house varies in its ability to ward off those things. So sometimes we just have to deal with them once they do get in and sweep them up and collect them. Because a lot of times you find them dead, right?
Yeah.
They might get in, you see them crawling around for a while, but then maybe on a windowsill, they'll just be laying there dead because they didn't have enough food reserves in their body. There wasn't enough moisture. They had no food source. They burn up all their stored energy that they need to overwinter, and then they die.
Whole different tack. And I'm going to try something here because I recall now that actually earlier this week I did get an email from somebody that had a question for you. I'm going to try to find that question somewhere in my email while you tell me about storing potatoes in the wintertime. Potato cellar, outside structure, inside structure. What's the proper way for keeping those potatoes you just dug out, and the apples as well, because those are something else that we get outside and try to keep over the winter. Talk about storage for those.
All right. So we can store a lot of different fruits and vegetables. Oftentimes it's best to store those separately. Apples will give off ethylene, which can cause other, especially vegetables, to ripen, and we may not want them to ripen anymore. So that's one little piece of the puzzle here. Temperature and moisture conditions. So potatoes are one that need to be in the dark. If they're exposed to sunlight, that's when they get that green cast to them. And so that technically that green cast, we shouldn't eat that because it can be poisonous if we get too much of a dose of that. And it will peel off, of course, if you're peeling the potatoes. But that happens if they're exposed to light. So we need to have them in the dark for sure. And then we want to keep them above freezing. 35 to 40 degrees roughly is a good temperature range for potatoes to be in. And that can be challenging to do in a house. But
okay, I want to get to this question here because we only have a few minutes left. And I found it.
Good. That didn't take long.
Question for Bob Pollock. I planted Brussels sprouts in late June. The sprouts are about the size of marbles. Are they done, or will they continue to get bigger? Are turnips an option for a cover crop for a vegetable garden? So two questions here. First of all, Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, so that typically Brussels sprouts are a long season crop that we need to have in the ground sooner rather than later. So So when we would be planting our spring broccoli and cauliflower crops while it's still in our cool part of the season, so April into early May.
So June is a little late to start.
June is a little late to start. At this point, just being exposed to the outdoor temperatures and day lengths we have, they're probably not going to get hardly any bigger than they are now.
Yeah.
They won't get to golf ball size.
Okay.
We just don't have enough day length and temperatures to do that.
Okay. So next year start earlier.
Yeah. Now,
second question
if you protected them a little bit, if you put row cover over them or kind of made a mini greenhouse over them, you might get them to, that'll warm things up a little bit. You might get them to grow a little bit bigger than peas.
Are turnips an option for a cover crop for a vegetable garden?
Yes. So turnips can be used for that purpose. One of the reasons they will even use this on a bigger scale than the garden in fields because of the turnips. They're going to look like a carrot, right? They're going to be big at the top and narrow at the bottom. So one of the reasons they have found to use that as a cover crop is because it will help loosen up the soil. So you have that, and what they do is they plant them in later summer, and then they'll put on growth, so we get the green manure crop effect. We get the growth on top from the turnips, and then the turnip growing in the ground When that rots over winter eventually, so by spring, that plant will start to break down because of all the freezing and thawing. And then as that breaks down, it left a hole in the ground where that turnip was. And so that then opens up a gap that lets moisture down in, and so it can help loosen up heavier clay soils, as well as provide the green manure crop value.
Thank you, Brian, for the question. Thank you, Bob, for the answer. It's Indiana in the Morning. It's WCCS.